Hey guys, welcome back and welcome to our very first ornamental video. Now, as I mentioned yesterday, we're going to start off with a group of plants that you guys have had so many questions and comments about over the past couple of years, even though none of them have ever been the star of the show. They've been in the background. Well, today we're going to change that and bring those background players right to the front. Now, flowers, they come and go. But colorful foliage is forever, or until the first frost. But if you look around my tropical garden especially, you can see that there's very few flowers. Most of it is made up of colorful foliage, both reds, variegated, different shades, different textures, all coming together to form the entire picture. In fact, my tropical garden is very heavily dependent upon colorful foliage because there's only a few flowers that I've got that actually put on a show, and they're at different times of year. So right now the cannas are kind of faded out, but they have colorful foliage as well, so they just keep on going and keep decorating the space. We've got plumerias, which offer great fragrance, and we've got white ginger that is just starting to bloom, and it smells so good. So that's it. For the rest of the, 9 months I get out of this jungle display, there's almost no flowers at all. So today in this video, we're going to focus on 3 colorful foliage plants. Bloodleaf, which so many of you have commented on over the past couple of years, and it is an outstanding addition to any garden, tropical or otherwise. It's got such a showy color, and it puts on this show basically from last frost to first frost. Easy to propagate, you cannot get any better than Bloodleaf. The second plant is something maybe a lot of you have grown or seen at your local garden center, and that is Coleus. Now, Coleus is a great annual. It's technically a perennial in warm tropical climates, but it's an annual everywhere else. And the great thing about Coleus is not only does it put on every color in the world you can think of, including blue flowers. You won't see blue in the leaves, but the flowers are a lot of the times blue. But every single plant has a different color variation, a different pattern. They're amazing, and they're super easy to grow from seed, and each one of those seedlings is going to give you a completely different type of display. And it's really cool when you see the seed tray and all the little leaves in there are all different colors. But if you find one you like and you do live in a climate that isn't tropical, I'm going to show you how to overwinter it so you can keep that same plant going year after year. The third plant we're going to focus on is Polkadot Plant. Now, I've been growing these Polkadot plants for years. They are perennial for me here in zone 10. They grow like crazy, fill in, are super bushy and colorful, and super easy to grow from seed and propagate as well. And I'm going to go through all of that. All 3 of these have another thing that they're great for, and that is they grow in almost any lighting. From full sun, especially the Bloodleaf, to almost full shade. And so that makes them great house plants during the winter. So if you don't live in a tropical climate, you can bring them in and enjoy them in the house until it's time to put them out again. So let's go over each one and how we grow them and how we propagate them. So if you don't live in a tropical climate, you can still keep them every year. Now we're going to start with probably the easiest one to grow just about anywhere, and that is the Polkadot plant. Now, like I said, it is perennial where you don't get frost, and even in light frost, you can actually just cut them back to the ground and they'll come back. If you get a heavy frost, freeze, or snow, most likely not going to come back. Now, throughout the growing season, a great way to keep them very nice and compact and bushy is to just pinch out the tips. And every day or so as you're walking by, just go ahead and pinch out the tips. That's a really great way to keep them nice and bushy and full. Now, if you live in zones probably 9A or less, you're going to have to protect this in the winter. And the best way to do that is either taking cuttings or just planting again next year from seed indoors so that they get a chance to start growing before the summer hits and they really take off. Now, if you want to propagate this by cuttings, it's super easy to do. We're just going to take a tip cutting below a leaf node. Now, these rarely bloom, but if they are blooming, don't use that section. Use a different tip that has no bloom on it. Collect several and either put them right into some water or in a plastic bag. And you want to remember, when you're taking cuttings of any kind, as soon as you sever the cutting from the plant, it is dying. And so you have to go into like emergency room mode, putting it in water, putting it in plastic, because you want to retain the moisture that's in that plant. Now, once you're back to wherever you're going to be rooting the cuttings, you want to kind of lay them out, and you're going to take off all of the leaves except for 2 to 4 small ones at the very tip. You can dip them in rooting hormone. It's optional. Sometimes I feel like it helps, and sometimes I feel like it doesn't do anything. You're also going to want some perlite. And perlite is a very, I think it's volcanic rock, but it's very light, very airy. It's the little white things you see in potting soil that give it its lift. And you can get this on Amazon. I'll put a link below. You can get it at Home Depot, Lowe's, any garden center usually has it. Now, you can use any container to root these in. I use recycled plastic cups. Yank them out of people's hands at the end of a party, when we have parties, and dump them out, rinse them out, and just save them for future use rather than throwing them away. And what you're going to do is you're going to take this perlite, and then you're going to put the stems down around the edges of the container so you can see them. And it also allows for air to circulate through there, and you're going to see when the roots start to grow. That's it. Within a few weeks, you should have roots galore and be able to plant them in some potting soil and keep them inside during the winter. Now, these are almost always in complete shade. So if you have like a bright window or a bright room even to have them in, that will be just fine. Keep the temperatures above 40 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not sure there's a better show off than Coleus. And Coleus is actually a perennial in tropical places. And sometimes I can get away with it here. Cutting them back, they will come back. I've had years that it works, and I've had years that it didn't. So most people everywhere grow them like an annual. You can grow them very easily from seed, but again, they are very easy to propagate from cuttings. Probably of all three of these, Coleus are the easiest. Another thing you can do is treat them like a house plant in the wintertime. Cut them back, not as far as we did the peppers, but almost. Cut them real far back, and then they will start putting out new leaves if you leave them in a really bright room, not a sunny window, but a bright window, not direct sunlight, because they do like shade. But they will grow for you throughout the winter inside the house. Then next year, bring them right back outside, or leave them in the house, whichever you prefer. One cool thing about all of these three is you can leave them in containers and just nestle them down. So I could have this in a container and you would never know it in this situation. So you could, grow it in the winter indoors, bring the pot out, maybe slip it into another pot that's already in the flower bed ready for you. Now, the reason I say that Coleus are probably the easiest of the three of these, even though they're all easy, this is the easiest because all it takes is water. Now, I took these cuttings about 2 weeks ago, and take a look at the root system they've got. That's great. So same as with the Polkadot plant, we want to choose tips that don't have a flower or even the beginnings of a flower. If you can see this right here, it's a tiny little flower that usually I pinch off, because all three of these plants really benefit from pinching back all the time, because they're going to keep getting bushier and bushier and bushier. A leggy bloodleaf especially looks really ridiculous. So you want to keep pinching it back. But for cuttings, we want to make sure that it had not started to produce a flower on the tip that we're taking the cutting from. And then all we have to do is cut below a leaf node, like I said. Now this one has a branching piece, but this whole piece right here is a leaf node. So I'm going to take off the leaves, take off this extra piece. And then the reason we take off most of the leaves, especially when they have leaves this big, is because water evaporates or transpires out of these leaves. And your whole goal is to keep the moisture in the plant when it's trying to create roots. So we want to take all these big leaves off of here, and again, leave 2 to 4 at the top, just like that. And like I said, it's easy to just put them in water. Now, every leaf node you have covered up, so in this case, well, it's only the one at the bottom. If I fill it to the top, I could probably cover 2 sets of leaf nodes, but each one of those is where the roots are going to come out. Now this coloring here, which I love, is usually the rarest of the colors, with this bright pink in the middle. So just because you're not guaranteed to get the same plant again, if I was to start again from seed, I want to definitely make sure I take cuttings of this one. So another thing you can do, because these leaves aren't big, but they're not small either. So you can actually just clip off half of them and make them a little smaller and a little bit less prone to losing water. That'll work too. Okay, now the star of any video it's ever been in. I don't care if it's one on peppers, tomatoes, okra, it doesn't matter. As long as it's in the background, I'm gonna get a ton of questions on what is that red plant. So this is Bloodleaf. Now, if you have no frost, like I don't, Bloodleaf is evergreen or ever red. However, you do need not only to pinch it back when it starts getting leggy, this requires, in a climate like mine, and maybe yours if you have hot summers, it requires you to cut it severely back. Just about, let's see, this is July, what's it? 2 months ago, I cut this back to about right here. No, actually right here. So this low. And in the last 2 months, this entire thing is put out again. So you do keep an eye on that, because it will be a little weird looking for a couple of weeks, but you have to do it. Well, unless it's got a big space to grow in, then I guess you don't, but it can start to flop and look a little unsightly. So I definitely keep it trimmed, but if you do keep it pinched, there's going to be less heavy pruning that needs to be done. Now this can be grown in full sun, part shade, or even deep shade with reflected light. I have some growing out front that literally get 0 sun, maybe 1 hour in the afternoon, and they do just fine. If you grow them in full sun, however, they will start to change color. They can get a little more pattern to them, and they get a little bit sun bleached, but it's still a cool color, it's a cool pattern, so you know, whatever you like. But I like mine in partial shade, because literally what can fill partial shade with this much brightness and color? I don't know, not much. So as with the other two, you can have this in a pot, maybe a large one, and bring it in for the winter, or super easy again to take cuttings. Now with these, I've done it both ways. Usually I do the perlite method. However, I tried the water method just a couple of weeks ago with these. We were getting ready to leave for San Diego. I knew this video was coming up, so I took the cuttings, I just threw them in water like the others, and yes, they are rooting, but I did have about 6 in here and only 3 lived. The others rotted and I pulled them out. So they can be done in just water, but the way I've always done it and gotten way more success than that is with perlite again. So same way as the polka dot plant, I'm going to take off the main substance of the leaves, bury as many leaf nodes in there as you can, and you can see there's quite a bit of water in there, so I do want it to stay moist. I want to always be able to feel moisture at the top of the perlite, but you don't want to see a lot of this whole mass floating on a bed of water underneath. As I'm doing this, one tip that I thought of for all 3 of these and virtually any cuttings, as I mentioned before, the more leaf nodes under the water or mix, whatever you're rooting in, the better. And so if you have a plethora of stems to look at, try to find some that have more leaf nodes closer together. That way you're going to get more under there. Like this one, look how far apart leaf node, leaf node. Now they get a little closer together up here, but it's something you want to pay attention to while making cuttings like this. Well, I hope you got something out of that video. This was my first ornamental video and I felt a little fish out of water. It was just weird not being in the vegetable garden and talking about vegetables, but let me know if you like this and what ornamentals that you would like me to cover on a future video. We're going to keep doing these. Coming up soon, we're going to be doing our fall bulb planting. So if you haven't ordered your fall bulbs like tulips, daffodils, well, fall planting, spring blooming bulbs, I ordered mine. They should be coming, I don't know, within the next couple of weeks, hopefully a week. But once I have them, I'll do an unboxing and we will do a video on how to plant fall planting bulbs, spring blooming. Now this coming Tuesday is our final Tomato Tuesday of 2020. And let's hope that when we start up again on our first Tomato Tuesday in 2021, that the world will look a lot different than it has for these past few months. Fingers crossed. If you learned something, give the video a thumbs up, please. That would really help. And consider subscribing if you haven't already. And definitely if you have subscribed, hit the bell icon so you get notifications every time we put out a video. I'll see you guys on the last Tomato Tuesday of 2020.